I always imagined that marriage would be the most stable part of my life. I grew up watching couples grow old together, overcoming obstacles, and building a full life side by side. So when my husband asked for a break, my soul simply stopped. How could he ask for something like that? I felt so lost in that moment, like I was being torn away from a place I thought would be mine forever. The request was something so simple, yet so devastating. And I, confused and heartbroken, didn't know how to react. At that moment, the pain paralyzed me. I didn't know what to do, whether I should try to fight for it or just let things unfold. But as much as I wanted to understand, something inside me told me that this break wasn't just about our marriage. It was about me, how I felt. I found myself in an emotional maze where the fear of losing what I loved the most mixed with the feeling that something inside me had already broken, even before he left the house. I didn't know it yet, but that break would lead me down a path I never imagined. And then, in the midst of this emotional whirlwind, I met someone. A man who, unknowingly, stirred something in me in a way I hadn't felt in years. He had nothing to do with my husband, and no matter how much I tried to convince myself that it was just a fleeting distraction, something in him awakened in me a feeling I no longer remembered. I started questioning what I truly wanted for my life, what I expected from a relationship, what made me feel alive again. And that's when everything started to change. It all felt like a funhouse mirror, the reflection of my marriage distorting, and at the same time, a new version of myself beginning to emerge. But I never imagined that my husband's return would be what sealed the decision that would forever change our story. What happened that day made me understand once and for all that sometimes the end of something is simply the beginning of something new. And now, everything I knew about love, marriage, and myself was about to be transformed forever. You'll want to know what happened next. I promise. If you've come this far, you won't want to miss the rest of this story. Subscribe, leave a like, and follow the journey of transformation of this woman who, in the end, discovered that the most important thing had been inside her all along. It was as if the world had stopped for a second. I looked at him, the man with whom I had spent years of my life, and saw the pain written all over his face. His request wasn't just a temporary separation. It felt like he had removed me, irreversibly, from a life I thought was mine. "I need some time," he said, his eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't understand. How could he ask for something like that? I felt so lost in that moment, as if I was being torn away from a place I thought would be mine forever. The request was something so simple, yet so devastating. And I, confused and heartbroken, didn't know how to react. At that moment, the pain paralyzed me. I didn't know what to do, whether I should try to fight for it or just let things unfold. But as much as I wanted to understand, something inside me told me that this time wasn't just about our marriage. It was about me, how I felt. I found myself in an emotional maze where the fear of losing what I loved the most mixed with the feeling that something inside me had already broken, even before he left the house. I didn't know it yet, but that time would lead me down a path I never imagined. And then, in the midst of this emotional whirlwind, I met someone. A man who, unknowingly, stirred something in me in a way I hadn't felt in years. He had nothing to do with my husband, and no matter how much I tried to convince myself that it was just a fleeting distraction, something in him awakened in me a feeling I no longer remembered. I started questioning what I truly wanted for my life, what I expected from a relationship, what made me feel alive again. And that's when everything started to change. It all felt like a funhouse mirror, the reflection of my marriage distorting, and at the same time, a new version of myself beginning to emerge. But I never imagined that my husband's return would be what sealed the decision that would forever change our story. What happened that day made me understand once and for all that sometimes the end of something is simply the beginning of something new. And now, everything I knew about love, marriage, and myself was about to be transformed forever. You'll want to know what happened next. I promise. If you've come this far, you won't want to miss the rest of this story. Subscribe, leave a like, and follow the journey of transformation of this woman who, in the end, discovered that the most important thing had been inside her all along. I spent days, maybe weeks, in a state of numbness. The moment he left, I felt as though a part of me had been severed from my body. There I was, trapped in the echoes of memories that once made sense, now distorted by the reality of our separation. It's strange how pain can settle into your bones, how you wake up every day expecting it to ease, but it only grows heavier. I thought I would crumble, that I wouldn't be able to stand on my own. How could I? I had always been defined by who we were together. But somehow I did. I started moving through the days like an automaton, doing the things I was supposed to do, pretending to hold it all together. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I found myself wandering through rooms that felt like strangers to me, searching for something I couldn't name. There were times when I almost wished I could disappear into the walls, become part of the silence, and not have to face the reality of the situation. It was like I was grieving, but not for the person I once was. I was grieving for the life I thought I'd had, for the illusion of stability and love that had now been shattered into pieces. But somehow, that grief didn't consume me in the way I expected. It woke something else inside me, an uncomfortable awareness of how much I had lost touch with myself. When I met him, it was like a light flickering in the dark. The man who walked into my life wasn't anything special in the traditional sense. He didn't have the charm or grandeur that would have made anyone take notice. But in the quiet, subtle way he existed, he made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love, not at first. It was a simple connection, a spark of recognition in the way he listened to me, the way he cared about the smallest details of my thoughts. He wasn't trying to fix me or fill the space my husband had left. He was just there in a way that felt real. And that, in itself, was everything I didn't realize I needed. Slowly, the fog around me began to lift. I started to remember what it felt like to laugh without a weight on my chest, to enjoy simple conversations, to feel like myself again. It was terrifying, though, because I couldn't ignore the fact that I was moving on. Not just from my husband, but from a version of myself I thought I had to be. The person I was when we first got married, the woman who had placed all of her hopes and dreams in the hands of someone else. I began to question everything. My marriage, my identity, my future. Was this all I had been waiting for? To be someone's wife, someone's partner, someone's support? Where had I gone in the process? I realized that for years I had lost myself in him, in our life, in what I thought we should be. And when he asked for space, it felt like he had asked for more than just time apart. He had asked me to question my own existence. The pain of that question was far worse than any heartbreak. It wasn't just about losing him, it was about losing myself. But in the midst of this turmoil, this new man showed me what it felt like to be seen again. I didn't love him, not yet, but I felt something real stir inside me. I began to wonder if maybe I had been living for the wrong reasons all this time. The more I spent time with him, the more I felt like I was rediscovering parts of me I had long buried. The woman who used to dream, the woman who used to laugh freely, the woman who knew how to enjoy life without fear. It was like a rediscovery of the simplest things. I no longer felt like I was just waiting for my life to happen to me. For the first time in years, I started to take control, to make decisions that felt right for me, even if they went against everything I had believed in before. I knew I wasn't ready to leave my marriage behind, but I couldn't deny the fact that I had changed. And I couldn't ignore the fact that, in that change, I was no longer sure I wanted to go back to the life I once had. I wasn't just walking away from my husband, I was walking away from the person I had been. But with that realization came another, an even scarier truth. The man I was beginning to care for wasn't someone I could just hold onto to avoid confronting my own pain. He wasn't a solution to my problems. He was just a person, and he was beginning to show me that maybe the answers I was searching for had to come from within. The pain of the separation didn't vanish, and neither did the guilt of betraying the trust of the man I had once vowed to love forever. But somewhere in the midst of the confusion, I realized that I couldn't wait for permission to live my life. I couldn't stay stuck in a past that was no longer mine, no matter how much it hurt. I wish I could say that I had it all figured out, that the path forward was clear, that my decision was easy. But it wasn't. There were nights when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. The weight of my choices, the complexity of my feelings, felt unbearable at times. But in those moments, I also felt something else, the smallest glimmer of freedom. The freedom to be me, without the expectations of anyone else. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't about him or my marriage anymore. This was about me, about finding myself again. I couldn't undo what had happened, couldn't go back to the way things were before. But somehow, I knew that whatever came next, I had to keep moving forward. I had to be honest with myself, and maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest part of all. It happened so suddenly, like a bombshell dropped in the middle of a quiet evening. I had been living in this new world, a world that was both liberating and terrifying, and then he showed up, unexpected, uninvited, but inevitable. My husband, the one who had left, the one who had asked for time, was standing at the door. The shock hit me like a wave, and I didn't know whether to run or stand still. His eyes searched mine, as if trying to find the woman he once knew. "I want to try again," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. For a moment, I froze. I didn't know how to respond, what to say, or how to feel. All those years together, all the memories we had shared, came rushing back in a flood of emotions. The pain, the love, the betrayal, it all swirled around me, and I was caught in the middle of it. It felt like a surreal dream, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Was he really asking to come back? Had he really changed, or was he just desperate? Was this about him trying to fix us, or was it about something deeper, something I wasn't ready to confront? I invited him in, mostly out of habit, not knowing what else to do. The moment felt too heavy, too full of unspoken words. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us thick and suffocating. His eyes never left mine, as if he was looking for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe a sign that I still cared. I could feel my heart pulling in two different directions. On one side, I wanted to believe that we could find our way back to each other. I wanted to believe that the love we once shared was still there, buried under the layers of hurt and time. On the other side, something inside me was screaming, warning me to be careful. I had changed. I was no longer the woman who would blindly follow him, the woman who would sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of our relationship. I had become someone else, someone who was learning to stand on her own 2 feet, someone who had learned the hard way that her happiness didn't depend on anyone else. His words were soft, filled with regret. "I made a mistake," he said. "I shouldn't have pushed you away. I've thought about this, about us, and I know I made the wrong choice." His voice cracked as he spoke, and I could see the pain in his eyes. But even as he spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already shifted between us. There was no going back. My heart was still heavy, but it wasn't with love for him anymore. It was with a strange sadness, a realization that the man who stood before me was a version of someone I used to know, but no longer recognized. The time apart had changed us both. I listened to him, but inside my mind was racing. The man who left me had taken a piece of my soul with him, and now he was trying to come back and take more. But I wasn't the same woman he had left. I had learned to live without him. I had started to rebuild myself from the ground up. And as much as I wanted to believe that his return would fix everything, I knew deep down that it couldn't. I had spent so many years trying to make him happy, trying to meet his expectations, and I had lost myself in the process. The silence between us deepened as he continued speaking, but my thoughts were a million miles away. I kept thinking about the man I had met during the time we were apart. He had never promised me anything, never asked for anything in return. He had only given me space to breathe, to remember who I was outside of the roles I had played for so long. And while I hadn't fallen in love with him in the way I had with my husband, I had come to understand something important. I had learned to love myself again. And so, when I looked at my husband, I didn't see the man I once knew. I saw someone who was asking for something he couldn't give me. I saw a person who had hurt me, a person who had taken me for granted, and a person who, despite his apologies, couldn't change the fact that I had already let go. It wasn't about holding grudges. It wasn't about revenge. It was about realizing that I had outgrown the version of our relationship we once had. And, as painful as it was, I had to let go of him, of us, once and for all. He waited for my response, his eyes filled with hope and desperation. But I couldn't give him what he wanted. I looked him in the eye and said, I can't go back. I can't pretend that everything is the same. I've changed. And I don't think I can be the person you want me to be anymore. His face fell, and for the first time, I saw the truth in his eyes. He realized what I had known all along, that the love between us had faded, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't force it back into existence. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and I realized that, for both of us, this was the final chapter. Not because we didn't love each other, but because we no longer knew how to love each other the way we once had. The version of us that existed before was gone. And in its place, two people were standing in front of each other, struggling to accept that it was time to let go. The days that followed felt like a haze. The moment I told him I couldn't go back, I felt both a weight lifted and a new, heavier burden settle in my chest. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something I had planned. But it was the only thing I could say, the only truth that had been growing inside me for so long, hidden beneath layers of guilt, fear, and uncertainty. The truth was that I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to be the woman I used to be, the woman who gave up everything for a marriage that no longer fit me. It wasn't that I didn't care for him. It wasn't that I didn't remember the love we had shared. But I realized that what we had was no longer enough. And I had spent so many years ignoring the parts of me that were slowly dying inside. I had to let go. I had to choose myself. Looking into his eyes as I spoke the words I knew would break him, I could feel the sadness in my own heart, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. The emotional turmoil, the confusion, the aching in my chest, it all made sense now. I wasn't running from him. I was running towards something else. A life where I could exist without the weight of expectations, without the fear of losing myself again. You don't understand, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I still love you. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can try again. But his words, though filled with regret, no longer had the power to move me. I had spent too many years waiting for him to change, hoping that he would wake up and realize the depth of what we had lost. But I knew now that the only person I could rely on to change was me. I know you love me, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But love isn't enough. It never was. Not when we lost ourselves in it. Not when we forgot who we were before we became us. The words stung as they left my mouth, but they were true. Our love had become something else, a shadow of what it once was. We were two people who had tried to hold on to something that had already slipped away. And no matter how many times we tried to revive it, it was no longer the same. I saw the pain in his eyes, and it broke my heart. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't keep pretending that things could go back to the way they were. I couldn't deny that the person I had become, the person I was starting to love and respect, couldn't fit back into the mold of our marriage. I had changed. I had grown. And in some ways, I had outgrown him. You've hurt me more than you'll ever understand, I said, my voice soft but firm. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. I need to move forward. I need to find who I am without you. His face twisted in anguish, and for a moment, I saw the man I had once loved so deeply, the man who had swept me off my feet all those years ago. But even in that moment, I couldn't turn back. I couldn't unsee the truth that had been slowly unfolding before me. Our love was broken, and no amount of apologies or promises could fix it. I watched him for a long time, as if trying to memorize every detail of this final goodbye. His hands shook, and his eyes welled with tears. I had never seen him so vulnerable, so lost. It was almost as if he, too, was mourning the death of something he couldn't bring back. But in that silence, I realized something. His pain wasn't mine to carry anymore. His choices weren't mine to fix. I had been carrying him, carrying our marriage, for so long that I had forgotten how to carry myself. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you. I nodded, the tears I had been holding back finally falling freely. I know, I whispered. I know you didn't. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes we have to let go. It was one of the hardest things I had ever said, but it was the truth. And as much as it hurt, I knew that walking away from him was the only way I could truly find myself again. When he left, I didn't feel the crushing weight of emptiness I had expected. There was no rush of relief, no overwhelming sense of freedom. Instead, there was a quiet sadness, a hollow feeling in my chest, as if something important had just ended. And it had. But at the same time, there was a strange peace, a quiet understanding that I was finally free to move forward. The next few days were a blur. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt like I had just stepped off a tightrope, and now I was floating in the air, unsure of where to land. I spent hours alone just thinking. And slowly, I started to realize something. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. I had to face the reality of what I had done. I had to let go of the man I had once thought was my everything. But in doing so, I had given myself a chance to be something more than just a wife, a partner, a woman defined by someone else's love. For the first time in years, I felt like I was starting to breathe again. And although the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to take the next step, even if I had to take it alone. After he left, everything felt like it had shifted in some inexplicable way. The house felt emptier, but at the same time, there was this odd stillness. The silence, once unbearable, became strangely comforting. I didn't have to listen to the tension in the air or the unspoken words between us. For the first time in what felt like years, I could just breathe. I thought the days would be harder, full of guilt, of regret, of wishing I could take back what I had said. But instead, I felt this weight lifting off my shoulders, one I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for so long. It wasn't that I didn't miss him. It wasn't that I didn't still love him, in some distant, lost way. It was that I had finally freed myself. The grief didn't come in the way I thought it would. I didn't fall apart. I didn't drown in tears. Instead, I mourned in quiet moments, when the house was still and the only thing I could hear was the beating of my own heart. I mourned the woman I had been. The woman who had lost herself in a marriage that no longer fit. The woman who had sacrificed pieces of herself to keep the peace. I mourned the version of me that was so desperately dependent on someone else to define my worth. But even as I mourned, something else was beginning to take shape inside me. It was this quiet, steady pulse, a part of me that had been buried for so long, waiting to be remembered. I had forgotten what it felt like to be just me. No labels, no expectations. No wife, no partner. Just me. And that was the most terrifying thing I had ever encountered. The more I embraced it, the more I realized how much I had missed the freedom of simply existing without the weight of someone else's needs hanging over me. But grief is tricky. It doesn't always look the way we expect. It isn't always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's subtle. It's in the quiet moments when you find yourself looking at the sky, realizing that you're not looking for someone to share it with. It's in the mornings when you wake up, and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like you're missing something, but that you're finally whole again. I spent time in the stillness, allowing myself to grieve, but also to grow. I spent hours in reflection, asking myself questions I had long neglected. What do I want from life now? What kind of person do I want to be? Who am I when no one else is watching? And little by little, the answers started to come. I didn't need anyone to tell me who I was anymore. I didn't need validation from a relationship or anyone's approval. I began to realize that the woman I had always been searching for was already here. She had just been waiting for me to find her again. It wasn't easy. There were days when the loneliness crept back in, when I questioned my decisions, when I thought about the comfort I had once known. But as I grieved the loss of my marriage, I also began to build something new. Something for me. A future I could stand in without fear of losing myself. I started doing things I had forgotten I loved. Painting, reading, walking alone in the park, enjoying my own company. I began to remember the parts of myself that had been silenced for so long. I started trusting my own instincts again, finding joy in the little things. And slowly, I began to heal. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing the past. It means acknowledging it, accepting it, and then choosing to move forward anyway. I couldn't erase the love I had for my husband, nor the pain of losing him, but I could choose to heal. I could choose to stop allowing the past to dictate who I would become. And so I let go. I let go of the guilt that had haunted me for so long. I let go of the shame I had carried, thinking that somehow I wasn't enough. I let go of the belief that I had to remain in a broken relationship just because it was what was expected of me. The grief was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer controlled me. It became a part of me, woven into the fabric of who I was becoming. And as time passed, I began to see it not as a burden, but as a catalyst. Grief had cracked me open, but in that brokenness, I found a strength I never knew I had. I found a woman who was capable of standing on her own, a woman who could face the world with courage and resilience. And it was in that moment, standing alone in the quiet of my life, that I realized I was finally free. I wasn't the woman I used to be, and that was okay. I was something more now, something stronger, something wiser. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of who I was becoming. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was already whole. And though I would always carry the memories of my past, I knew they wouldn't define me anymore. I was ready for the next chapter of my life, one where I could finally be the woman I was always meant to be. It wasn't until the dust settled and the days began to pass by in their quiet, unremarkable way that I truly began to understand the depth of what I had done. Letting go is never as simple as it sounds. It isn't just about walking away, it's about understanding that there's no going back, no rewinding time. There's a finality to it, a weight that settles in your chest when you realize that you've just closed a chapter that you once thought would never end. I had let go of my past, of the man I once loved, of a life I thought I was meant to live. And though the grief didn't leave me, it began to fade into the background, no longer the loudest thing in my life. Instead, it became a quiet reminder of how far I had come. Slowly, I began to embrace the silence. I started to see the space I had created for myself, the emptiness that had once felt so unbearable, now filled with possibilities. I found myself taking long walks, thinking about the future, imagining what it might look like if I were to walk this new path alone. I began to appreciate the freedom of making decisions based on what I wanted, not what was expected of me. It was scary at first. I didn't know what the future held, and there were moments when fear crept back in, making me doubt myself. But each step I took felt like a step away from the woman who had been lost in someone else's life, and closer to the woman I was always meant to be. It's strange how, when you let go of something, you realize just how much it was holding you back. I didn't know that I had been clinging to the remnants of a past that no longer served me. I didn't know how much of myself I had given away, thinking I had to stay in a place of comfort, even if that comfort was suffocating. But now there was no more pretending. No more living for someone else. The decisions I made from this point forward were mine alone. I could be whoever I wanted to be. And that was both the scariest and the most beautiful thing I had ever realized. There were still moments when I felt the sting of loss, when I missed the life I had once had. There were times when I missed him. The way he would laugh, the way he held me when things were hard, the memories we had shared. But those moments became fewer and fewer, and slowly, the memories of the past began to lose their power. I started to realize that I could cherish the good moments without holding on to them as my anchor. The person I had been in those moments wasn't the person I needed to be now. And with that realization came peace. I had let go, and in doing so, I had made room for something new to emerge. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean that the past doesn't matter. It just means that you stop allowing it to control your future. And I had reached a place where I no longer allowed the past to define me. I no longer carried the burden of guilt or regret. I had made a decision to let go of the past and move forward. And in that decision, I found strength. As I look forward, I know there will be challenges ahead. There will be days when I question whether I made the right choice, moments when I wonder if I've done the right thing. But for the first time in a long time, I trust myself. I trust the woman I've become. And no matter where this new path takes me, I know it's mine to walk. It's a long road, this path of self-discovery, but it's mine, and that's all I need to know. And as I stand here, looking ahead, I realize that the future is full of possibilities I once thought were beyond my reach. I'm not just moving forward, I'm stepping into a life that's waiting for me to claim it. And if you've come this far in this journey with me, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my story, to walk this path of healing and self-discovery with me. These stories, real, raw, and powerful, need to be heard. By subscribing, you'll be helping to keep these voices alive, ensuring that the people who have suffered, loved, and transformed have a place to be heard. It's not just about watching a story, it's about understanding, connecting, and honoring those who have walked through pain to find healing. I invite you to comment below, share your thoughts, your experiences, or simply your support for those who are still navigating their own journeys. It's important to preserve these memories, to give voice to the stories of those who have endured so much, so they aren't lost to time. If you've ever felt the weight of what I've shared, or if this story has touched you in some way, I want to hear from you. Let's keep the conversation going. And don't forget to check out the other powerful stories in our playlist. The link will be in the description or pinned in the comments. These are stories of growth, of struggle, and of change. They're stories we all need to hear, stories that remind us we're never alone on our paths. Join me on this journey. Together, we can embrace the strength that comes from sharing our stories.